relatable in a corporate and a business environment, how we can apply it, what are the things that we all need to be aware of. Many of you must have heard that, to be a good public speaker, you need confidence. But here's the thing. Confidence is like a diagnosis. For example, if you have fever, you have symptoms, right? But what caused the fever? What kind of virus or bacteria are we dealing with? Now, this is where a public speaking true mentor or coach will be able to guide you, where you need to understand that what are those pillars or foundations or critical elements where we are falling weak, and hence our confidence is poor as a public speaker. Many of us have gone through, times where we felt that we were perspiring, the heartbeats get elevated, and trust me, I've gone through it too. But being consistent in my efforts, understanding this science, how I can conquer it, how I can overcome my weaknesses or improvement areas. It's been over the years efforts. And I believe that if I can do it, so can each one of you. I wasn't born in the hospital from my mother's womb, giving a speech. I was born like all of us. And if you think that I have reached some place where I have become a good public speaker, I want to inspire you all to do the same. And this is going to be my humble effort and initiative through these masterclass series. Through the course of time, we're going to be addressing more topics such as leadership agility, negotiation skills, but we'll come to those disciplines one at a time in one session at a time. Today, let's get started with essentials and critical aspects of public speaking that I have learned in my 2 decades of my career. I want you all to focus here on the business world scenarios. Some of them were touched upon, but typically today I'm covering now the online and the offline scenarios of public speaking. How I understand, and this is clearly my perspective, having run 3 companies in the Indian corporate landscape, public speaking today is not just limited to probably talking to 200 people, 2,000 or 20,000. Public speaking today is actually about whether you're presenting yourself or your client or your organization or your family at a social event. Public speaking is about your initial conversation right till the end, how you carry forward a meeting, whether it could be personal, professional, or social, whether it is offline at an event or it is online. And that's what we need to really understand. So first things first, let's begin with client interactions. We all are aware that client interactions can be, done on call. There are many softwares available today, offline, depending on the nature of industry that you're from. And today I'm very happy that I have clients on this masterclass who have joined us from across the world. We have US, Singapore, UK. We also have defense personnel, some commanding officers who are a part of this masterclass. Thank you so much for being a part of this initiative. When I come to client interactions, allow me to help you understand that all these scenarios can actually be applied to all of us. Whether you're an army officer, whether you're in the defense services, whether you're in the government job, whether you're in a boardroom, whether you're going for your child's parent-teacher meeting, whether you are actually in an auditorium, you are doing an induction, orientation, a teacher, trainer, handling an event, or offering a service to a client, post-sales service, business development, marketing, sales, everywhere today, you need public speaking. In fact, public speaking today has become an extension of your communication skills. And in a business environment, we know how important it is. In fact, in a social environment, also it has become quite a skill to reckon with. So we are going to have, or rather make an endeavor to take some insights from my learnings over the years apply to all these scenarios, which I'm sure all of you can identify with in some form or the other, as well as learn and practice on these, because practice and planning is what is going to make us a better public speaker. Allow me to focus here on the critical aspects of public speaking, my dear friends. I'm going to begin first with persona. Persona is something that exuberates your extension of the personality. It is about confidence, it is about personality, it is about how you present yourselves. Acoustics are equally very important part. And when I say acoustics, not many of us understand. So acoustics is, of course, all about how you're sounding. Now, if it's a live or an offline event, it is important to be aware of what kind of an environment do we have. Whether there is echo, there is reverb, whether your mic is making you sound good or not, whether you're fully hydrated, because public speaking is a lot about breathing control, and we're going to get to those aspects as well. So acoustics is very important aspect because it makes you sound good. I hope I'm able to do justice here on the virtual call, and my acoustics are great because, again, now that we are all pivoting, we are all shifting our businesses from offline to the online world, persona, acoustics are very important equally. Don't be mistaken that, because now everything is on Zoom call or GoToMeeting, we don't need to worry about it. We do need to be aware about it. Since you are so many participants, I'm, unable to see all of your videos in the grid view, but I promise that when you have closer meetings, when you have a closer client call, it is important to be presented and to be sounding to the best of your abilities, understanding the technology that you're dealing with, what kind of software you're using, what kind of a delay do you have. So from acoustics persona, the third critical element that I would like to share are visual aids. Now, when I say visual aids, typically, if you all have seen my YouTube videos, whichever few I have posted from my events, you would have seen that I'm holding cue cards. And cue cards are nothing but very, very professional with a brand logo, could be personal brand logo, could be your organizational brand logo at the back so that the audience sees that. And you have your pointers in a chronological order mentioned there, just to make sure that as a speaker, you are on point and you are actually delivering the speech without any interference. Another visual aid that we very often use in our boardrooms and in our conferences, in orientations for our teams, are presentations. Today, I will be sharing at least one slide on how we should make our presentations. And if you appreciate how I've made my presentation, well, that's a cue that you can learn from as well. Fourth is distractions. We've covered the 3 points. As you can see, I've depicted it as an iceberg. And we all know science about icebergs, right? Because icebergs are only 1/3 above water and the rest are all below water. So we see that acoustics, persona, and visual aids are what are visual, or rather what are visible to the audience on the other side, whether offline or in an online world. And therefore we have to pay a lot of attention. These are key elements when we talk about public speaking, whether online or offline. Now, few more critical elements that we need to understand and we need to take care of are distractions, crisis, scenario, and team. Now, these are the things which are behind the scenes. When I say distractions could be, some of us get very fidgety or we get very upset when we do not have a favorable reaction from the audience. We have a lot of naysayers in the audience. We have a very closed body language in the audience, right? In boardrooms, we've especially seen it. Or we might just have from a fellow boardroom or from a fellow speaker a question which has hijacked our entire meeting agenda. So these are all distractions. Now, as a public speaker, it is a myth when people think that public speaking means monologue. You have to be aware that public speaking also includes interactions and Q&A with your audience, right? And that's why these distractions have to be taken care of with great elan, great ease, great dignity, great sophistication, and that's how you become an effective and an impacting speaker. Crisis. Crisis could be anything. I'm sure all of you at your company events or outside or even on calls, with your clients, whether on Slack or whether on Zoom, you've noticed that there's crisis. There's technology crisis, there's human crisis, there's social crisis, and crisis can also be sending out an email, because that is also an online format of public speaking where you have 30 people of a team copied and you intended to send out the email only to one person, but it's gone to everybody. That's a crisis. How do you recover from that? Posting on LinkedIn or on any of the other social media, and you do a faux pas because you kind of posted it at a wrong date or with wrong details, or you fudged your email addresses. Guess what? That's a crisis. Now, that is an online public speaking format, and we need to understand that crisis is also something that as a public speaker, we need to manage. I'll give you an example from my experience. There was a point in time, and this was one of the top FMCG companies in Delhi that I was hosting the annual conclave for. And for some reason, the entire sound system just backed up. It was a closed door meeting with the top CXOs from and delegates around the world. We were about 120 of us. And because over the years, I have trained my voice, I have, opened my voice, I realized that I could actually continue the show without the mic. And I stepped down from the stage into, the audience, and I asked them that in the interest of time, because everything is moving as per time, allow me to, continue. I hope I'm audible. I would be repeating my sentences, and I'll make sure that I'm pacing up and down across the length and breadth of the hall. Guess what? All the delegates, all the CXOs were very impressed with the initiative, because as we've heard it many times, and we've lived by this age-old dictum that the show must go on. Yes, my dear friends. So crisis is something that we need to always be ready with. Why do we need public speaking? Guess what? You're working on a presentation and your boss is going to be delivering it to the client, and last minute the boss develops cold feet and calls you and says, hey, you know what? Why don't you go and deliver it to the client? Now, because you are not ready for a public speaking ability and you've just done the presentation slides, you stutter, you stammer, there are many ahs and ums. Again, that is a position of crisis. So today we are trying to learn this art, or rather the skill of public speaking, understand the importance of it, and absorb some insights from my experiences, how you can actually improve on the skill, upgrade it, and be ready for any eventuality, because in your business, in your career growth, in your professional growth, this at least should not be the hindrance. This will also help you be known as a thought leader. This will also help you be known very well amongst your teams, far and wide, not just in India, but also internationally. Scenario. When I say scenario as a critical aspect, I mean the environment. Yes, my dear friends, the environment, whether it's an open door, whether it's closed door, whether it's team building, where you have to, take out more through of voice, or whether it is a closed door meeting or a client call one-on-one with your customer. Guess what? You need to be aware of the scenario and accordingly modulate your voice, and accordingly make sure that your voice is heard loud and clear to all the participants or attendees. Your tone should change depending on who are your team members. Team members also means that you have to be very, very aware of who are the organizing team. As a good public speaker, and mark my words, I've seen many CEOs, I've worked with many CTOs, I've worked with many vice presidents, and there are only a few of them who actually bother to acknowledge the moderator with their name, who bother to acknowledge the team, thank the team for the opportunity. And that in itself is a great mark, or rather a distinction between a good public speaker and a public speaker who's just there to check in the box. Be aware of your team members. Be aware. As a public speaker, you have the limelight. So always make sure that you are showcasing yourself, your persona in a humble light. You're also making sure that everybody is on the same page and everybody is appreciated, because every effort is important to making your speech a success or to making your conversation a success. I sincerely believe that great speakers aren't born, they are made. This is something that my dad always told me. He's from the army. So imagine in the army, for those of you who know about defense forces, you always have to give motivational sessions. I mean, they give one command and you have so many soldiers ready to lay down their voice. They're icons of public speaking. But their kind of public speaking is very different from the public speaking that we have in the scenario. The principles, critical aspects, essentials are the same. You just have to customize it to the scenario and the teams that you're dealing with. I hope that example kind of helps you understand what I'm trying to emphasize here. Moving on, we need to communicate with impact. In fact, just today morning, since we were inviting questions, somebody used the hashtag Divya, ask Divya, and they posted, and we have a lot of list of questions, and I want to quickly come to those. If you have any questions, don't forget to type it in the chat window. It'll be difficult for me to kind of hear every question from all of you since we have a sizable number, right? So it's best that you type your question in the chat window and my team will share it with me and I'll try and address all the questions. So communicate with impact. If we have to communicate with impact, we need to make sure that we understand the 3 V's here. And I've tried to depict it on the slide as verbal, visual, and vocabulary. Even when I do mentoring sessions and I work one-on-one over Skype and over Zoom with a lot of individuals around the world as a public speaking coach, it is important to understand the different percentage weightage that we have to all of these 3 V's. I've tried to depict it here in, obviously inspired from my experience. 55%, in my opinion, is visual. And when I say visual, and from the previous slide, if you remember, we were talking about the persona, right? Persona also includes body language. So if you see that our first aspect is 3 C's. Now 3 C's for me is clear, confident, and concise. My dear friends, gone are the days when we used to use complex statements and big statements. Today, you got to make it very simple. I'm sure you all are aware of the rule of KISS. Keep it short and simple. And that's where my theory of 3 C's is inspired from. Concise, confident, clear. Our public speaking, which is built upon the foundation of communication skills, should be based on these 3 C's, because there's no way that we can convey the meaning if we go beyond these 3 C's. When I was invited last year at the TEDx conference, and I was the first speaker because no other speaker wanted to, go. And guess what? Even it was my first TEDx, so I was also nervous. But I adhered to all of these parameters and I realized that, okay, this is what helped me actually deliver an impacting, a presentation at the TEDx conference. Of course, the video is available on YouTube. I'll be able to share the link with all of you. 55% visual, 38% is verbal. When I say verbal, I'm talking about your tone, your voice, your pitch, your voice type, your modulation. All of these aspects come into verbal, and 7% weightage is what I will be giving to vocabulary. So vocabulary is important. A lot of my mentees and executives that I coach, employees that I coach at various organizations, they always ask me that, Divya, I want to learn more words and I want to learn more heavy words. I've seen speakers use it. It doesn't matter. What matters is what is your spontaneity. What matters is how clear, how concise, how confident is your message in delivery. What matters is number 2, kinesics. And for those of you who don't know what is the meaning of kinesics, it is a more technical term for body language. Body language, actually non-verbal communication, accounts for more communication than the verbal communication. I mean, we all have been in schools and colleges where we make friends with the first impression, guess what? Without even talking. And we all are being based, even in organizations, we are based on these social principles of making communities, making teams. For those of you who probably might be on the other side of the table where you take interviews and you select candidates, why do you always ask, tell me about yourself? Even before jumping into the technical expertise. And I know that you are making a decision in the first 5 minutes of the candidate opening their mouth, especially if the person is applying for a managerial or a vice president role. Guess what? The body language is taken into account. The 3 C's is taken into account as a public speaker. Third point is articulation, my dear friends. Articulation is sounding of the words with the right meaning. Again, complex words needn't be used. And I'm hoping that I'm, leading by example here, because I've tried to make this presentation and this masterclass extremely simple to understand for all of you. For which, if you have any feedback, I will be taking a poll at the end of this session, and I will be very happy for you to share your opinions on this masterclass, which will be encouraging for me to conduct the next ones. So articulation is something that we really need to understand. A lot of people, a lot of my mentees, a lot of organizations, they think articulation is hand movement. It is not hand movement. It is about choosing the right words to express, sounding the right words to express, and they could be simple words, they could be absolutely connected words. So articulation makes an important point here. Number 4 parameter for an impactful communication as a public speaker are vocals. And I'm going to get to the next slide, which is a very key slide for me, where I highlight vocals. Because vocals means, again, your voice type. So when we do extensive sessions on one-on-one basis, all my public speaking is actually customized to what is your strength. All of us genetically have inherited a certain voice type. Guess what? We all are aware of the guitar. And how do you think the guitar strums? There is a hollow cavity in a wooden box, and you have strings in front of that hollow cavity in a circular dimension. You tighten the strings and then you have the guitar. So for those of us who have studied science, God has gifted us a guitar. If you're an atheist, you can even call it a higher power, higher energy, whatever it is. But we all have been blessed in a human form with a guitar. And these are our voice cords. Like the guitar, we need to keep tightening them up. And how do we tighten them up? And guess where is the cavity, or where is the hollowness? If you all remember from our chemistry and science lessons, the phenomena of resonance. We have a food pipe right behind the vocal cords. When we wake up in the morning, when we wake up in sleep, from sleep, we all sound, our voice sounds a little heavier. And that is what actually is the concept of resonance of voice. Now, so many of us are living day to day and we are not paying attention to how we can improve our voice quality. We can. Some of you who have a little bit of a shrill voice, a high-pitched voice, guess what? It is possible to get depth in your voice. It is possible to get heaviness in your voice. You must have heard a lot of men getting complimented with baritone voice. It is nothing but a very, very bass-heavy voice. So when we do these sessions at our institute, we make sure that the candidate understands what is his or her voice quality so that we can work from that foundation. So it is very important to understand vocals, which means your modulation, which means the heaviness of your voice or the shrillness. And based on those inherited and genetic factors, how we can train our voice to be more impacting or how we can train our voice to be sounding more impressive. And that is what vocals are for. Proxemics. For those of you who are not aware of this science, proxemics is a science which means the science of distance. And today is just unfortunate with COVID-19, the global pandemic, we all are anyway observing social distancing. Well, not social isolation, thankfully. So if we are observing social distancing, it also means that we are also rewiring and understanding ourselves with the science of proxemics. So kinesics and proxemics, in very simple layman terms, it is body language and the science of distance between two people. And why is the distance important? Because as a public speaker, how far should you be from your monitor? How far should you be from a microphone in a scenario where you're delivering a speech? How far should you be in a boardroom away from the first two chairs, which might just be like very close to your body? All of these aspects are very important to make you sound as an impacting public speaker. And that's why I thought these 5 parameters along with the 3 V's are going to help you understand that these insights are what I've amassed over the years and have helped me become a better public speaker. Coming to the vocals aspect, and this is something which is, I would say secrets to my success. And I think you should totally, learn this, understand this. For me, in my experience, speech flow influences, I've charted them down to 4 areas. Number 1, as you can see on the screen, is diction. Now, a lot of us who don't understand diction means enunciation. Enunciation word came from a from a Latin word. And enunciation means putting the right stress at the right word. For example, if you've noticed that even on a Zoom call, masterclass meeting that I'm doing with all of you, I'm also using my hand movements, my kinesics, I'm taking care of the proxemics, I'm also aware of the acoustics. So I am trying to do walk the talk here where you can understand and probably just take some inspiration that putting the stresses on the right words always helps you convey the right meaning. And if you can see in my entire conversation till now with all of you at this masterclass meeting, I have been trying to put, or rather lay stress on certain words which I want you to absorb. Second is punctuation. It's very important to understand why punctuation is important to anybody's talk, whether it is a small talk, whether it is, a speech, whether it is team meeting. In tech companies, we do stand-up meetings, a lot of our clients. That is the first ground for actually practicing your public speech, right? If you lead by example, if you actually try and, make sure that you can start with certain aspects of punctuation, it will help you put the right entire stress as well as the meaning that you can convey. So punctuation adds expression. For example, if there's a full stop, your tone and your vocals match it. If there's a comma, there's a semicolon. Usually when I'm making my script or if I'm making my, even presentation, I always underline the words that I want to put stress on. So punctuation is very important, exclamation mark or maybe, a bold out text. All of these things convey to the other person. Caps lock versus sentence case. These are very important, especially in the virtual world now where we are doing businesses across, borders online, and punctuations have become more important than ever. In emails, I've seen a lot of professionals just writing, 2 lines and just finishing it there. Trust me, the more we go virtual in our learnings, in our conducting of business, the more we have to make sure that these are not the faux pas that we are indulging in as a public speaker. Next is tone. Now, a lot of people know the word tone, but they don't understand what is tone. So I realized I need to define tone for my candidates who come to me for the speaker coaching, and how I help them understand, and I would like to share that, is by a formula of PQS. So if I have to define tone, I will actually define tone as P for power, Q for quality, and S is strength of voice. If we take care of the power, the quality, and the strength of voice, guess what? We have a great tone. And tone actually adds to the meaning of what we are trying to say, along with the punctuation and the right diction. The fourth aspect here is intonation. And as you can see, I've given it like a 360-degree view, because these four elements actually define our entire speech influencer. There are times when we even use sounds, right? Mm-hmm, ha. We are not even saying a word, but we are still conveying a meaning. And how do you think we are conveying a meaning to the other person, or to the team, or to our subordinate, or to our senior? Because we are using these speech flow influencers. One rule that all of you should really take away from my experience is amplified speech is directly proportional to amplified persona. What I really mean by this is, if you're in a boardroom and you're not using a mic, that means you're not amplifying your speech. So your body language should be in sync with the space around and your amplification of your voice. Whereas if you're using a caller mic, or if you're using, let's say you have a town hall meeting, or if you have a conference meeting or an orientation of your team, and you have a bigger team and you're using a caller mic, then you need to understand that you're amplifying your voice. And if you're amplifying your speech or your voice, then you need to amplify your persona. Right now, I'm not using this much of space to use my hands to express my meaning. I'm actually keeping it just in sync, because I'm not amplifying my speech. So be aware of this rule. It's a very simple rule. There's no way of missing it. Please be aware of these four vocal elements that actually influence our speech. Because now next, in subsequent slides, we are going to come to the content as well. Before I jump to the content part, allow me to remind you, for those of you who've recently joined or who've joined late, that if you have any questions, please do type it in the chat window. I will be taking a poll, a masterclass survey, since this is the first of its kind in India. And it's a great learning, it's free. So towards the end, I would request you all to participate in the poll. And for those of you who haven't been able to sign into this meeting, because we capped it at 100 attendees, we are also going live on Facebook. Feel free to share it with your friends, your colleagues, and spread this education and experience sharing that I'm doing, and all my learnings that I'm doing here in this masterclass. So moving on, let's talk about the presentation slide. Now, presentation slide, my dear friends, have you all noticed, senior people who come onto the stage, a moderator welcomes them, and we all take a sigh of, like I would say, despair. Because when the PPT comes on, which probably is being made by their EA or PA, you see 68 written at the bottom right of the presentation slide. As a rule, and I have worked with many global leaders around the world at different seniority levels, I have attended many meetings, virtual or offline, in the boardroom and conferences. Very few leaders, those who are speakers, who are emphatic, who are impactful, and who keep getting invited to many forums, is because they are following the rule of 10, 20, 30. Now, this is a rule you can all remember, share it in your teams, make sure everybody learns this. 10 is the minimum number of slides. If you can't, as a leader, convey your message in 10 slides, guess what? You can use 60 slides and you won't be able to convey the message. It's more about not reading from the PPT slide, but actually enhancing the meaning, using the slide as only a reference and probably a visual aid to help you deliver your public speech or a speaker session or a meeting. So 10 is the maximum number of slides that I will request you. Usually, if it's a normal meeting with a client, I always recommend 4 or 5 slides. That's the attention span, including your opening and the closing, and you should actually wrap up in that. 20 is actually the minutes or the timing. As a speaker also, try and limit yourself to 20 minutes when you're invited to speak, and make sure that you open the house for interactions. So a lot of forums today by many companies are inviting speakers. We also take speakers who train with us. We take them to organizations as public speakers. But we always advise them that if you've been allotted, let's say 45 minutes or 30 minutes, make sure you're sticking to maximum 20 minutes. Otherwise, wrap it up with 15 and make sure you've inspired the audience to ask you many questions. I can see already a lot of questions pouring in for me here. And I'm going to be quickly wrapping this up so that we can also get to answer a lot of questions. But 10, remember, is maximum number of slides. 20 is the time that you should allot yourself in a monologue. And of course, 30 means minimum font size. Please use 30 and above, and a very simple, very corporate font style and a font size that can be readable in all formats. I've also seen this whole crisis that leaders face when they come to a meeting or a conference, and they've got their presentation in a particular format, and suddenly the event team is unable to convert it. So there's last minute, and when they convert it to a compatible format on their systems, guess what? It gets distorted, whatever images you had planned. I'm sure we all have been privy to that. Last but not the least, when you're making your PPT, 1 slide per idea. So let's stick to 1 slide or 1 message per idea. A picture is equivalent to 1,000 words. I always encourage everybody to use a visual reference along with very clear-cut, concise, and clear words. Let's not put sentences and paragraphs on our presentations, guys. It's all passé. The meaning has to be committed and cleared and given across to the table in few words. So similarly, on social media, it's public speaking forums, whether it's on Twitter. Twitter is a great practice. So if you don't have Twitter accounts, please make your Twitter accounts, because you are learning to limit your message, a paragraph converted into a sentence. The same thing should be able to convey the meaning. So that helps you deliver more efficiency, rather communicate more, whether to your customers or bosses, and everybody will, always appreciate you saving their time by giving the right meaning with the right amount of message rather than lots of sentences. While we're coming towards the end of this, masterclass monologue, I would like to say, because then I'd like to start taking queries. We have a lot of questions here. I want to also help you all understand the content guidelines. So if you've seen, I've kind of structured this masterclass in public speaking in a way where I've shared secrets to what are the critical aspects, what are the essentials, what are the, prime parameters that we need to take care of, how we can, 2-3 rules that we can make the slides on. At the same time, how we can actually make our speech impacting. Now here, content. Remember that content is equally important to our delivery. Always. You take it in any industry, content and delivery have to go hand in hand. Number 1, research and connect. Whenever you have a speaking opportunity, whether it is closed doors, small groups or bigger groups, it doesn't matter, online, offline, please research your topic. Please research what you're going to be presenting on. And not just the content, also connect with the people that you're going to be presenting on. I advise many IT and tech firms for their employer branding, for their customers, and for their personal brandings and learning initiatives. And some of them actually are working in sync today with fellow vendors from across the globe. And one common issue that came out again and again was that their client is sitting in the US. They are based out of Pune. Their teams are based out of Pune, who are constantly, innovating, creating their programs, coding, analysts, everybody's here. but they are working simultaneously with two more vendors, one from Russia and one from Sri Lanka. And guess what? In between all of this, the message is getting lost to the client. Now, while communication is equally important, the 3Cs, clear, concise, confident, connecting with your fellow people is also important as part of your research. Get to know them before you get to a new meeting, or if you've been invited as a speaker. These days everybody's doing webinars and web series. Please understand who your audience is. Please understand who you are going to be dealing with. Just don't go that, you know what, I just have to like be on the video, because guess what? You'll be there for one video and probably not for the second one. You'll be invited as a guest virtually or offline for one event and not for the second one. Research and connect. Very important. This is your behind the scenes tip. Second is setting the context. And we always need a strong opening. In my life, through my public speeches, whether it was televised, whether it was on radio, whether it was to, you know, a client, to a pitch to an investor, always I have, thought that it is important to deliver an elevator pitch, to the extent that even to my employees, I deliver an elevator pitch, because it's a practice for me, right? Because you're talking to your team. And if in 3 minutes you cannot give a strong opening that can keep the interest of the audience, guess what? They're not going to be paying attention, and you'll hear them, gossiping amongst each other, whispering amongst each other. And we've seen so many of those conferences or those meetings where, people lose interest. It's very evident through their body language. So setting context, if you remember, like for this masterclass meeting, I set the context right in the opening, because I wanted you to have your expectations set, how we are going to maneuver this and move this ahead. So research, connect, setting context with a strong opening is very important. Third is profiling your audience. There is a very interesting rule that I use, and you can write it down, WIIFM. It's an acronym I came up with, and it is what's in it for me. WIIFM. That's another interesting rule that I always observe and I convey to all my mentees who are connected with me, because WIIFM means that whoever is your audience, whether 2 people, 20 people, 200 people, what's in it for them? If I'm sharing my personal experience and I'm not able to tell you all how you can apply it to your professions and your careers, what's in it for you? So WIIFM is a rule that is very important in today's business world, especially in the Indian landscape if you have global clients, because you have to always be focused on also conveying a message. When we go and we meet our clients from abroad, we start, talking about our experiences, our stories, or what's happening in COVID here. But be interested in them as well. It's not about always just sharing your story. You have to profile your audience. If you cannot profile your audience, especially if you have a bigger audience and you don't know what is their demographics, the age parameter, you don't know what is their gender distribution, you don't know what is the regions that they're coming from, because cross-cultural communication has to be taken care of. If they are more local than they are more from, some other country or state, guess what? You won't be able to come up with an effective content for your, speech or your opening. And I think all of these aspects have always helped me make my content strong and flawless. Number 4, engage and motivate. When I say engage and motivate, that especially when I'm dealing with bigger crowds, usually my signature style is that right from the start of the opening with, a client or a team, I will always, give the importance, and I will, talk something where their presence is celebrated. So we need to shift focus. As public speakers, we tend to forget that we already have the limelight on us. Now, it is important that we need to shift that limelight also on the audience to make them feel engaged and inspired to continue being in the meeting. There are enough scientific facts to tell us that, we have probably attention spans of which are equivalent to a pigeon now, with so many options, so much to watch, so much exposure, Google at our fingertips. But especially when it comes to, as a public speaker, delivery and speeches, and where you are probably speaking as an extension of yourself, I would say, it's important to engage and motivate your audience. And whether that is one person, 100 people, 10,000 people, doesn't really matter. How do you engage? Whether it is through, statistics, whether it is through humor, whether it is through a motivational quote, if that is relevant. And a lot of people in the business world feel that, we should, if we are doing a business meeting, we can't use anything informal. Now the lines are getting blurry. With this digital transformation, our personal and our professional lives are getting blurry. Our parameters of work are getting blurry. Work from home is going to become the norm of the day. So we need to make sure that we engage and motivate, because guess what? At the end of the day, people are still doing business with people. As a speaker, you still want to impact the emotions of your audience. And if you want to inspire, your technical yarn is not going to make you inspire people. What is going to inspire is how you make them feel at the end of the conversation, how you made them, recall you. And scientifically, we have 3 methods of recalling. One is auditory, second is visual, and third is kinesthetic. Auditory, of course, we remember audio first. Visual, we remember the visuals first. And kinesthetic, we remember the experience first. So if today, a year from now, if you all who are a part of this, 100 of you who are a part of this masterclass meeting on the public speaking, if you still remember this session, guess what? It was the kinesthetic learning, and probably that would be a win. And that is the same thing that you need to do with your teams. And it doesn't happen in a day. You have to cultivate it. You have to kind of imbibe these trends in terms of content and vocal guidelines so that you become a better public speaker with every passing day or meeting. Next is personalize. When I say personalize, I was joking with some seniors from the industry yesterday that even today, even when, all our interviews have become virtual, people still, when they are asked, tell me about yourself, as a speaker, they start talking about their Janak Patre. Hamara zila ye hai, hamara kshetra ye hai, I come from so-and-so family, this part of the world, and so many siblings. But that is irrelevant. Now, when I say personalize as a speaker, please pay attention to the fact that we need to personalize it with some experience sharing. Again, don't forget the rule that profile audience. That number 3 point emphasizes that what's in it for me. So for the audience, it's not really important what are your roots and where you're coming from. I think it's very important for an audience or the person on the other side of the table to understand that how you can personalize your learnings, how you can draw parallels to what you've learned to your career. How is your roadmap fitting in absolutely right with your ambition? How is it that, you can guide through in a very adaptable manner with the right kind of attitude and speak as an authentic person, as an extension of your personality? These are the things that everybody today is looking for, because it's the emotional connect which is going to get you be remembered as a speaker. And that is a mix of, a little bit of experience sharing, but the experience sharing has to be connected to what the message you're trying to derive. So when I delivered my talk at TEDx, one of the key elements that I spoke about that makes you an impacting leader is connected thinking. In our life, everything needs to be connected. So connect the dots. People say you have to think out of box. You have to think out of box. You know what? I think it is so overrated to think out of box. If you can, great. If you cannot, don't beat yourself over it. But it is very important to connect the dots, whether it's your personal life, professional life, your social life, your teams, your interactions with outside world, that is strangers or clients. You need to understand that if your dots are not connected, guess what? The story is incomplete. And we are now pivoting from the public speaking world to the art of storytelling, which has also become quite a fad these days. You must have seen so many authors and so many people trying to, say that storytelling is the new buzzword. It is an extension of public speaking. We are incorporating a piece of storytelling when we are personalizing in our formal speech. So again, no deep diving into your backgrounds or your, personal agendas. Personalizing is about experience sharing, connecting the dots, and giving it a 360-degree view, rounding it up to give a little crisp content that you want to deliver. Sixth, summarize and Q&A. Now, I've often seen that when we are talking as a speaker, we land up doing Q&A the last. I'm sure you all have seen that. You start at a great energy, and then it all drops by the end because you open it for Q&A, and not always audiences are forgiving and they have zero Q&A. And somehow when I've, interacted with the Indians versus people abroad or towards West, I've realized that, Indians always warm up when they have one or two people asking the question. And when the time is running out, suddenly all the questions come up. I've hosted a lot of offline network meets, and that's what we've seen. So it's important to know that Q&A can be done as a speaker before. So before you summarize, and maybe in Q&A, if there is a live active audience, you can take those insights and incorporate it into your summary, slide. And that is very important because as a speaker, you began at a certain note and you're ending on a certain note. So summarizing is the key. We all do it by default, whether in whichever scenario we are in, but we always leave it at a very low energy note. Please remember, a strong opening and a strong finish are the key to success to any speaker. With that, I'm going to be coming and rounding it off to the speech essentials. These are some of my rules. They've really helped me in 2 decades, and I hope they help you too. Less is more. I've already emphasized on that when we started this masterclass meeting. Add a sense of humor only if you can pull it off. Not everybody can pull off a sense of humor. And I've seen a lot of leaders trying to, incorporate a sense of humor in their content. And guess what? My request to you is, if it's a sense of humor, practice that as well. On your friends, on your family, see how it's perceived. Because when you're amplifying your talk, how it's going to be, perceived on the other end is something, the impact is very different. So sense of humor is great, but add it only if you can pull it off. Otherwise, stick to statistics or analytics. We have so many surveys. It's always great to begin, right in the initial part to kind of share this. Use minimal aids. Again, don't use sheets of papers or something. Even when you're doing a virtual call or a client meet, you can always keep a little bit of a reference note on the slide. Use it as a cue card. And trust me, there's no problem at all, because very often we see that our conferences online get hijacked. One question, rogue question comes in and somebody has hijacked the meeting, and the minutes of the meetings are zilch, and we need another meeting to set the agenda. So it's very important to win audience trust as well. Trust can be won by building credibility over the years, and therefore I always request that now that we are pivoting to a more online world, start building your credibility, start being a public speaker in the online world. It is very important whether you can choose the mode of, the mode of written, or you can choose a visual mode, but start reaching out and building your credibility. Only then people will trust you to be a part of a session and listen to what you have to say. Finish on or under time, very important. Many of us, we've seen speakers who land up, exceeding their time. Even when it's boardroom presentations, they get way off the chart. I think that is something which we need to always be aware of. If you don't have a clock that you can monitor, make sure that you have a colleague who can give you a show of hands to give you a 15-minute mark or a 10-minute mark to start winding down the meeting or the conference. As a speaker, this is your agenda. Just because you are a speaker and you've been put in the limelight or the spotlight does not mean that you are entitled to just hog on to everybody's time. That's not what I feel is a great trait of a public speaker. Pace yourself. Pace means the speed. Let me give you two personalities examples. If you've all heard Mr. Anand Mahindra, he's a known public speaker. He's one of the public speakers who's great in the Indian business world. We also have Mr. Amitabh Bachchan. He's a great public speaker with a baritone voice. And the third gentleman that I'm going to be taking the example of is Dr. Shashi Tharoor. And fourth, let me bring some diversity here, Indra Nooyi. Now, all these four iconic Indian names are public speakers. I'm sure you'll agree. But all four of them have a different style and different pace of talk. If you've seen Amitabh Bachchan, he bites the edges of his words. There are exact, very, very spaced out intervals between the two words where he's making sure that everything is heard very clearly. If you hear Dr. Shashi Tharoor, he blends the words one into another. It's a very conversational style. And usually when you see Miss Indra Nooyi, she vacillates between both styles, and only very, very good public speakers can actually do a blended approach or conversational approach versus biting the edges of your words. And Mr. Anand Mahindra keeps it very clear, very slow paced. If you've heard him talk, he does not risk it at all. He plays it safe all the time. Now, depending on your voice quality, depending on your personality, depending on, that's where you need to probably seek help with a mentor or a coach and understand what is a style that suits you. Pacing yourself will also be dependent on how much time does it take for your thoughts to get converted into your words. And trust me, it's okay if it takes time, right? So we need to eliminate the ahs and ums. And if you've heard many people who are conducting a meeting and delivering a presentation, they do it all the time. Why does that happen? Because we are thinking faster than what we are talking. Now, it is a very subjective matter, and it is completely okay as a public speaker if you talk slower. I talk slower, and I'm completely comfortable with it because you have to balance out and rather speed track the distance of your thoughts flow and delivery between your thinking and your speaking. So I hope these tips and rules really help. I'm going to round it off here by sharing that, we are the Advanced Learning Institute, and we are more happy to help as many people. We do a lot of online sessions with our clients all over the world. So feel free to reach out to us if you want to upgrade in any of your skills. That's my email ID. You can write to me directly and we'll be happy to help. We customize the content. I have about 12 mentors impaneled with me from an experience level of 7 years all the way to 40 years plus as public speakers and as leaders. So in different skill sets, we actually do competency mapping and we match the mentee with the mentor. These are bespoke sessions, so these will be one-on-one because they need to be customized to your abilities, which we first recognize, and it's a very interactive way of learning. When I finished my certification from Harvard, I learned the Socratic way of dispensing learning. So we do that. It's very interactive. It's a dialogue. We also provide speaking opportunities. Once you are a confident speaker with us, we will endorse you. So this is something that you can also, take advantage of. Expand your network with us, and we always give corporate discounts. So if you have your company taking initiatives, feel free to reach out to us.